Our world is lost in unnecessary fear and hurt. Our systems seem scientifically engineered to make you small, powerless, and always waiting for the next great leader who will fix the problems around us. Worse, we're witnessing neighbor versus neighbor while warfare breaks out around our family tables. But you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. I'm so excited for today. This is one of those rare opportunities where we get to talk to someone who is like someone about their human side.
Yes.
And I'm not going to give it away, but why don't you do the intro and then we'll bring this amazing person on and we can begin.
So I met this amazing person in 2020 face-to-face for the first time. And the thing that's extraordinary about that is we should have met all the way back in 1996 really should have met at that time. So Jo Jorgensen is joining us today, and she was running as vice president in 1996 on the Libertarian ticket with Harry Browne. And I like to say that Harry Browne changed my life. I joined the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement in 1996. Didn't stay with the party so much, continue to support its candidates and stuff, but I stayed in the movement from that point forward. It became kind of my life. And we had all the same friends and acquaintances, like the people that brought me on to the party and helped me learn the ropes were the very same people that were working in one case directly inside her campaign as vice president. And so the fact that we had so many friends in common, it was amazing that it took all the way till 2020 for us to meet. She is the 1996 vice presidential nominee, the 2020 nominee for president of the United States, did a great job running against two other old guys, whatever. And she's also the chairman of the board for People for Liberty, Home for Liberty, those organizations. And full disclosure, I serve alongside her there. So Jo Jorgensen, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. And there's absolutely no way I can live up to that introduction. If they had only been so kind to me during the campaign, maybe it would have been a little easier.
So why does someone run for president? Because it seems like that, there's a situation will put you in for a lot of punishment.
I quote Michael Cloud and I say for self-defense. I had so many reporters ask me, oh, well, running for president, that's pretty high. So when did you first become interested in politics? Did you run for student council? Were you, president of the, high school class, whatever it's called? And I said, no, in fact, I hated that. I had read Animal Farm in 5th grade. And when I get to high school, it's like, well, that's not fair. How come there's some student body president and student council that gets to make all the decisions? That's not right. So no, I've been against government from the very start. And, but after seeing all the shenanigans that they do, it's like, you got to do something.
Very good. So let's go back in time. Let's go back to the beginning and find out a little bit about how you got involved in all of this in the first place. What is kind of, I guess, your pathway to libertarianism? For example, do you consider yourself having been a libertarian all along?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the first presidential candidate I ever voted for in 1980, which was the year I graduated from college, 1-year master's, was Ed Clark. So I've never voted for a Democrat or Republican, at least for president. Usually when I go vote, I'll just vote straight Libertarian ticket, even if there's only 3 people out of 20 races. Maybe if I want to throw in some shenanigans, I'll do that because we've got open primaries in South Carolina. But yeah, as far as my path goes, as I mentioned, I read Animal Farm in grade school, and it just really opened up my eyes. And then when I got to college, I followed the typical boring path of I read Ayn Rand. And, when I read Atlas Shrugged back in the 70s, it was like, oh, well, this is crazy. There's never going to be homeless people on the sidewalk. She's a bit extreme, but I think she's got some good ideas. And what was so amazing about her writing is she put it in terms I had never thought of. Like, we've all thought about people passing laws so that their company is favored. I forgot that you were in Ohio. I remember reading James Bovard, I'm probably quoting the wrong author, back in the 90s, that there was a law passed in Congress, US Congress, not Ohio, US Congress, in which the law only affected one company in the entire United States. And it was in Ohio, somebody who paid enough money. And it's frustrating hearing, especially people on the left, say that, well, big greedy capitalists. And it's like, how do you think that these corporations got so big? You've got big greedy capitalists who are using government. If we didn't have big government, then they would actually have to earn our business. They would have to please us instead of pleasing the lawmakers.
So how did you find the Libertarian Party then?
Oh, I was, well, it's actually kind of a funny story. And this is one that I didn't really go into on the campaign trail too much, or ever. I just moved to Dallas for, I got my undergrad degree, a BS at Baylor. And then I went and got my MBA at SMU in Dallas. And I never listened to talk radio back then. It wasn't really a big thing back then. But somehow moving boxes, I ended up listening to talk radio, and it was Honey Lanham on the local show talking about the Libertarian Party. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody else believes what I believe in. Because I had just figured, okay, I'm just going to go my entire life and not vote because this is just silly. And I got to go meet these people. But what's funny is, in the and we're all sitting here talking casual, right? Around the campfire. There's a joke about libertarians, many of them being povertarians. The people who are in the movement, who've traditionally been in the movement, have been in the movement because they were passionate, not because they want special favors, not because there's some big industrialist who's trying to bribe officials, but people who are just really passionate and they're willing to spend their last few dollars, to be able to go to a convention. Well, keep in mind, I heard about it in Dallas, right? So it's like my husband and I were like, okay, we got to go check this place out. And it was in this mansion in Dallas, and it was like in the backyard and all these people in their fancy clothes. And we're looking around, and our thought was, I don't think we're rich enough to join the Libertarian Party. It's probably the only local Libertarian Party in the entire United States that had any money. So, and since we were both students at the time, we were like, well, we're not rich enough. So I actually didn't join the party in 79, but I joined the movement. I helped candidates, and I didn't technically join the party till, whatever, 10 years later, 8 years, whenever it was in the 80s. But yeah, it's funny that's where I ended up.
Running for vice president then wasn't the first time you'd run for office either, right? You did run before?
Right. I ran in 92 for the US House, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I learned, I made a lot of mistakes, learned along the way. But the one thing I had the most fun doing is Bob Inglis was running. I don't know if you've heard of him. You are getting exclusive stories from me, things I've never told. Bob Inglis's slogan was "Reclaim Congress," and I don't even know if I had heard of his slogan yet. But anyway, so I go to the first event, and I'm a speaker too. The South Carolina really has been good for all candidates. I was on the debate, the NBC
Good.
local debate, and pretty much everywhere I went, they let me share the stage too. So, and usually I would be the last one. So Bob Inglis would get up there and say, I want to reclaim Congress. And so I would get up there and think, oh, this is too easy. I want to reclaim America from Congress, and then talk about how, we got to get all those people in. Now, since we're kind of humanizing it here, as you can imagine, I was so busy on the campaign trail, the housework didn't always get done. And my husband one day quipped, maybe we can call Bob Inglis and see if he can reclaim this house. It's like, yeah, I know. Takes a lot of time to run on the campaign trail, especially when you've got 2 little kids.
And then you run for vice president. So there's
Yeah.
one campaign. And then, so why? So the Libertarian Party, for people who are not familiar, who might be listening, the Libertarian candidates for president and vice president are nominated separately. And at the time, it wasn't the custom. I know this changed here a little bit recently. There's some candidates did speak up at the last convention as to who they wanted, but most of the time there wasn't ticket running. There was, you ran kind of independent. So you ran your campaign to be vice president.
Right.
Why did you get into that race? What motivated you to do that? Because that's an even bigger undertaking potentially.
Yeah. And I've been told that I was the first one to ever do that. So I'm not sure if I am,
Okay.
but okay. But it was a full scale campaign. So some people called me who had seen my local campaign. Nancy Lord, who was the VP candidate in 92, had come to Greenville, where I live and was living back then. And she, we had some great events set up, which I will give credit to my campaign manager, David Morris, and not take the credit. But we were on the stage, and they actually lifted us off the stage, and we're on our backs being crowd surfed in a venue in which we, I think, broke every fire law, in the state for how many people were there. And they said,
well, no victim, no crime.
Yes. And and some people called me up and like Nancy Lord, like people had been watching, and they said, you did a really good job. Would you consider running for VP?
Is
And
crowd surfing one of the requirements? I mean, what were they what were they judging?
I think they were judging the answers that I gave and my debate performance, which looking back now, I cringe, but at the time we were still in the infancy. But no, I think it was my passion and the fact that I was kind of bringing more of a human, more of a mainstream idea without sacrificing our principles. And that's the thing, because we've had people in the party who come in, and yeah, they're trying to appeal to the mainstream, so much so that they talk about outlawing guns and marijuana. But I go in and talk to mainstream people and explain how these ideas work for them without saying we're going to outlaw guns and outlaw marijuana. And by the way, we're not going to outlaw heroin either. but let me explain why it helps you, Mr. Mainstream, Mr. and Mrs. Mainstream America.
My first exposure to you was watching you give your speech at the convention, because this was my road to Damascus weekend, really, was watching that convention on C-SPAN. I had told my friends that I wasn't going to be able to vote for the Republican nominee in late June. That was Bob Dole. And I said, I just can't do it. I felt like the contract with America was being sold out. Like it was proof to me they didn't mean it.
Yeah.
And then I saw, the Libertarian convention on TV, and I got to watch your speech, and it was very well done. It was the type of speech.
That wasn't the 1-900 phone sex one, was it? I think that was just my campaign speech. Harry did not like that, by the way.
Yeah.
He did not like my stump speech.
No, I remember that too. Now that you mention it, the politicians get you all hot and bothered, right?
Yes.
Yes.
That's
but
much
they never
than I had.
But they never come over, right? Wasn't it something like that? Yes.
Yeah, I should have used hot and bothered. That's even better than what I used.
But the stuff that you said was, people can get a feel for it right there. It was designed to stick in the head. Like you heard it and you were like, oh, and it was memorable, and you kind of got the point in the way that you communicated. And then you bring that same energy to the 2020 campaign. You were prepared. You knew how to go out and do these short soundbite interviews. Today we've got a more open forum,
Right.
but in those situations, you got to be able to hit those marks pretty quickly and represent things pretty well. How did you learn how to do that?
Yeah, again, we're talking Harry Brown's people. Michael basically gave me an assignment beforehand to
Michael
read.
Cloud.
Yes, to read an hour a day. And, libertarian books. I mean, I still got remember how I quoted that thing about the Ohio and
Mhm.
the law written for
Yeah, yeah.
that one company? I just did so much reading like that. And in fact, one time, sometimes it's just timing. I remember I had just read, and maybe it was in the plane ride on the way there. But it was like within the previous few days, I go to Pennsylvania. I think it might have been Bucks County. I'm not sure. And I'm campaigning still for the VP slot, so I'm in front of uh, libertarians. And somebody asked me a question about the Bureau of Land Management, and I could actually answer it because coincidentally, I had just read a book on it. Like I said, I think within the few days before, and they're like, "Wow, she knows about." But and by the way, the funny thing is, in 2020, I see on the crawl of a news show, I see it says BLM. And my first thought was, really, they're talking about Bureau of Land Management now in 2020? Well, I'm prepared. And then I find out later, no, that stands for Black Lives Matter. So wrong decade, wrong
Yes.
decade. But
And
no,
how,
red,
by the way, that brings up an interesting question. How different was it running in 1996 and 2000? I have my own thoughts on this, but I'm sorry, in 1996 and 2020. I
yeah.
have my own thoughts on this, but like it was a different country and a different set of problems and times. What did you see as the differences?
Well, I mean, there's differences in the country and kind of talking with people, but then there's logistic differences. Like we really didn't, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have social media, we didn't have a lot of internet stuff. Although what a lot of people don't know is Harry Brown and I used the internet a lot more than the other major candidates. And
Mhm.
our campaign on a computer was entered into the Smithsonian Institute, and supposedly every time a display goes in there, it never leaves. So supposedly Harry and I are in the Smithsonian for having used.
I'm not surprised because my experience on the opposite end of all of this as a brand new libertarian was that I knew that I needed to check out that page 3 to 4 times a day because
Mhm.
I didn't want to miss any of your media appearances. And the campaign was pretty good about saying, this just booked and we've got this going. And if I didn't check regularly enough, I might miss an appearance on CNBC or CNN or whatever it was that you guys were doing at the moment, my
Yep.
local radio talk show. So I didn't want to miss any of those if you folks were on, you or Harry were on. So
Yep.
I was tuning into all that when you guys were in debates or whatever. I wanted to make sure I was sitting down or at least had recorded those shows. And
Yep.
so that
And
website, was very
yeah,
useful.
yeah, and also we didn't have podcasts back then, so it was
No.
a bigger deal to be on the radio. So you had to be sure to catch those because then it might be a while. Now I do remember I was on up to 6 times a day, but then some of those, somebody, like out in Wyoming where nobody, beyond the
Mhm.
cows out there can, for a few hundred miles, can hear. So it had to be your area. It wasn't the streaming coast to coast. There were
Yeah.
a few major people, of course, but yeah. But your question about preparing, the other thing I did, and I ran for VP because I wanted to be VP. I didn't run for it never even occurred to me to run for the presidential nomination. I didn't think I was ready, and I really didn't want to be on the head of the ticket. I really wanted to be VP. That's where I started. In fact, I joined the race before Harry Brown, but I joined the race as VP. And so when, we solidified into one campaign, hey, it's my job to support you. And I remember I gave an answer that Harry Brown did not like. It was on immigration, and I was on a Texas radio station. And so somebody from the campaign, Michael, called me, and we had a 3-hour conversation that evening. Okay, let's practice, and here's how we want you to answer the question. So, and a lot of people thought, oh yeah, you're the woman, the man's in charge. And it's like, well, no, it's not because I'm a woman. It's because I'm the VP candidate. It's my job to support him. But probably the funniest thing, did you know about my smuggling the book onto the stage at American University?
I don't remember that, no.
So I was in a VP debate, and Harry had written, his campaign book was basically Why Government Doesn't Work.
Mm-hmm.
So before, and I guess because it was a third-party debate, it was remarkably, lax in security. And this was before 9/11. And so I was able to make my way on stage with Harry's book and put it in my little lectern there. And then we're like partway through the debate, and I hold out the book and say, as Harry Brown said, and after I pull it out and show the book, the moderator said something like, well, we're not exactly here to sell books. And then in a question later on, I did it again. And I had people say,
well, you had to because the moderator had said something. Right. I mean,
And I had somebody say, I can't believe he took you. Well, he really didn't tell me not to do it, but I had people say, I can't believe he told you not to do it and you do it again. And it's like, well, that was my job that's my job to support Harry. And I thought that was a great book for everyone to read. But again, behind the scenes on this, I had actually rehearsed with Sharon Ayers and everybody who was on the team before, how to introduce the book without it being too awkward. And so the first time I hold it up, it's like upside down, and I could see they were kind of like trying to hold back the laughter. So what they did before the campaign is they took 2 covers and cut them up, so it didn't matter which way I held it, front or back, it would be okay. Like they taped it together, so both sides had a front side the right way.
You learn an awful lot when you're doing this, because I ended up in his 2000 campaign as his press secretary, and it is an incredible experience. One of the greatest experiences of my life. Might have been the best job I ever had.
Oh yeah,
isn't it? So many things happen, and you have so many stories to tell when it's all over.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a chance in a lifetime, and I've had so many people ask, "Isn't that a lot of work?" And it's like, yeah, the hardest work, the most work I've ever done in my life. But oh my gosh, it's so rewarding. Yeah, 2000, I was not involved at all. Like, I don't even think I put a sign in my yard. I was in the middle of my doctoral program, getting my PhD, while still running my company full time. So, that was
your company was, and your degree, your PhD is in.
The company was, we duplicated computer software legally. Started out as the 3.5-inch floppies, and then moved to CDs. And my PhD is in industrial organizational psychology. So
which means what?
Some people ask me, so what, the company lies on the couch and you analyze it? But no, I've got a PhD in psychology, but no, I cannot diagnose you with schizophrenia. My classes included teamwork, motivation, leadership, selection, hiring the right people, performance appraisal, basically the psychology side of running a business. So not accounting, finance, which I already had with my MBA.
Okay. So you're also involved with People for Liberty, Home for Liberty. What's your role and interest there?
Well, I got started because during the campaign, a small group of people started People for Liberty, and they had a campaign which was Let Her Speak, trying to raise awareness to get me into the debates. And they had, like National whatever day where people were driving around in their cars honking. And on the road, I was often complimented for that. They were like, wow, great, you're running a great campaign. The favorite part of my campaign is, this whole Let Her Speak campaign. And it's like, yeah, that ain't us. That's another group of people. and even more so, it started out on the 5014C. Did I say that right?
501c4 side, yes.
Thank you.
501.
Thank you.
It's a nonprofit organization.
Yes, but it's the 4, not the 3. And by the way,
Mhm.
sometimes I'm a little dyslexic.
It's
But
okay.
so I mess up. Which, can I tell you, I'm also well, I haven't flown in 20 years, but I'm a pilot, and they would give you a 4 code 4
Mhm.
transponder code that you had to put in. And whenever I would take somebody new up in the plane, I'd be like, okay, listen for the 4 numbers and put them in, because I always mix them up. And it's always like, well, I really want to fly with you. I promise I can fly. I just can't put 4 numbers in the right order. So
Yeah.
anyway, back to the C4. This was the legislative side. The the like the PAC side, where it's illegal to have any kind of communication, any kind of coordination with the actual campaign. So it's not like it was a different kind of nonprofit group which could talk to the campaign. And later on, they did switch to the 3 from the 4. So apparently, and I didn't run the campaign. Steve Dasbach did a great job running it. I was the candidate. And one thing I learned about campaigning is the candidate should be the candidate and not the campaign manager. So I let
Mhm.
Steve handle all that. But my understanding was they were able to talk with them like later on, but not in the beginning. And so after the campaign, after the election, uh, when I was looking for my next step, how can we keep it going? The problem we've had is we'll have a campaign and then nothing for 4 years, then another presidential campaign and nothing for 4 years. Now, before social media and before everything that's going on right now, yes, it was hard to keep it going, but now it's a lot easier. So I wanted to keep the momentum going after the campaign. And so, yeah, I went to PFL because I thought, wow, if they can do so much, just as a beginning little group without any money at all, think of how much we can do if we grow and really start to, grow the movement and become a larger organization. So, just the fact that people thought that this little group of people, um, who put on this campaign was part of our campaign, I think is pretty amazing.
It is amazing. So, what was the goal then of your campaign? Why did you do, like, as just broadly speaking, not personally, but like, what were you trying to accomplish with this?
Again, self-defense. That
Okay.
the other 2 people, sending our
Did you have a strategy that you were attempting to pursue though? Did you think that your campaign could make some kind of difference? How did you hope to make a difference long term by running?
Yeah, well, part of it, of course, I hate to use the word education, um, but part of it is to show people that there is an alternative and to get them out of the right left thinking. Marshall Fritz or David Nolan, rather, David Nolan and Marshall Fritz, took it and ran with it. Such a genius, taking it from, you know, what 1 dimension to 2? Yeah, I guess it's not
Yes.
quite 3.
Yes.
Taking it from right, left to right, left, up and down.
Mhm.
And, the biggest compliment I can get, and I got this in 92 when I first started running, like my neighbors and friends, when, because they'd never been exposed to these ideas before. Um, Whenever somebody would say, when I read the newspaper, back then we had newspapers, okay? When I read the newspaper, I now read it differently. Things look different to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, exactly, because people have this idea that you've either got to give up this, or, you know,
Yeah.
just
So these are the things that you're doing and that you're putting your time in. I'm kind of curious what motivates this. Like, I understand self-defense, but like, you're just one person. Like, why why were these activities the things that you chose to do?
but we're all just one people, you know. Donald
Mhm.
Trump is just one person. Joe Biden is just one person. Um, Elizabeth Dole was just one person who had a universal drinking age. And by the way, I'm not, you know, I even though my PhD is in industrial organizational psychology, uh, I teach intro to psychology, and I've taught cognitive psychology in other classes, so I am somewhat well-rounded. And you know how people say, "Well, the brain doesn't stop developing till age 25." Actually, that's women's brains. Men's brains don't stop developing until age 28. So I'm not suggesting that 21 is a, you know, isn't a reasonable age to start drinking. But I really don't like the idea of basically the Soviet style central planning where people in Washington all over the country can decide what the drinking age is for every state, what you should teach in your schools in every state, or even how you should run your police department. You know, the one thing that we had during the campaign was defund the police. And I was repeatedly asked, well, what's your thoughts on defund the police? Since that was a major topic.
Mhm.
And I said, my thought is the president should have absolutely nothing to do with that. That we shouldn't have people in Washington telling towns how to run their police departments. That's up to the mayor, city council, county council, voters, you know, whoever. But it sure shouldn't be up to the president. So, you know, it I guess part of it is just the outrage that I feel, you know. Yeah, I mean, if you look, you know, the answer is self-defense, and so you didn't tell me we were going to get so deep here because usually that's
Oh,
my
yes, I
answer.
did. Oh, yes, I did. I wanna go way past that.
Well,
I
back to
want people to
we're
find
gonna
out
go.
something that they wouldn't have known about you otherwise. I'm interested. So self-defense,
Well,
I understand that, but I like how you just said something about outrage. Outrage kind of interests me. There's an emotion there.
right. Yeah, well, when you said something different, I thought something like people would find out that I don't eat red meat or something like that, not deep philosophy, you know, philosophy stuff. But I hadn't thought about this before, but, you know, being a psychologist here, okay, according to the state of South Carolina, I'm not a licensed psychologist. I do have a PhD in psychology. If I were in my home state, I could call myself a psychologist, but just, you know, disclaimer, not a licensed psychologist here. But as somebody with a PhD in psychology who teaches it at a major university, um, you know, we look at things, is it like a behavior or is it an attitude or, you know, what is it? What kind of thing are we talking about here? So when we talk about self-defense, yeah, that's a behavior. I'm defending myself. But I guess what drives me even more would be not the behavior of self-defense. I guess it would be the emotion, the attitude of outrage, that I am just so outraged. I mean, AOC, who is um, just arrogantly talking about Republicans screaming because somebody's taking away their gas stove. It's like, okay, AOC, how would you like it if somebody took away your curling iron, you know, or that eyeliner that you're always putting on your makeup, you know, on these videos? It's like we've all got our things that we like, and why is it up to you to decide what the rest of us should use? And it's outrage.
So outrage motivates you to action.
Yeah, I do get upset. It's, you know, like watching a football game, you know, where you throw the socks on the TV. That's me with, you know, watching um any of these people on TV. And it's also and you know, also what gets me is and most people don't like hypocrisy. And that's why cognitive dissonance is so big, why it's such a motivator to drive people to do one thing and not another. But what really drove me in 96, and things haven't changed, is the hypocrisy of the Republican politicians. So, you know, I mentioned in passing uh, my theme. My talk was my stump speech. The title was Why Republican Politicians continue to sell out freedom or keep selling out freedom, something like that. And I would make a distinction between the many fine Republican voters who really want smaller government so they can make their own decisions, so they can send their kids to the kind of schools they want to, so they can decide, if we should support a country halfway around the world, or maybe you can better use the money at home, versus the Republican politicians who keep promising smaller government, who keep promising Republicans, yes, we're going to let you make your own decisions, and then continue to take the decisions away. Now, back then, the outrage was over, and I'm gonna have flamethrowers at my house now. Was Ronald Reagan? It's like, oh, we need the smaller government of Ronald Reagan. He was in office for 4 years. Every one of those 4 years, government got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Not 4 years, 8 years. 8 years. Government got bigger and bigger every single year for 8 years. And I've had some Republicans say, well, but Congress didn't hand them a balanced budget. Okay, well, don't sign it. Tell them no, go back and do it again. Now, could they have overridden his veto? Sure, but at least try, at least try. The hypocrisy is just amazing.
Can I ask a kind of a crazy question that's related somehow?
Sure. Even if it's not related, that's what I specialize in, obviously, since I'm very good at going off topic.
So when you started talking about outrage and hypocrisy, all of a sudden I could relate to that. Because I've felt outraged too. I've been outraged as a Republican. I've been outraged as a Libertarian. What else are you feeling right now? I mean, this is an important way that humans connect with one another, around emotions. And so I'm just curious, what other emotions are there that drive you to do what you do, Jo? Because clearly we can run in opposition to lots of things, and as a third party, often we do. But there must be something that's like, what's really firing that up? What's like beyond the opposition?
Well, and here's where I need some work on myself. Here is where I am a typical libertarian. One of the biggest problems libertarians have is we all say what's wrong. We're experts at saying what's wrong and what we shouldn't be doing. What we're not experts at is, okay, so what's the answer? What should we be doing? And especially given the fact that we know from research that positive campaigning works better than negative campaigning. And that's one reason why, Ronald Reagan had such a great run, the whole Morning in America, right? That he was very positive and it makes people feel good. And by the way, so you might ask, well, if negative campaigning doesn't work, why do it? Well, sometimes you almost have to do it if your opponent,
make a contrast.
I'm sorry?
You have to make a contrast.
Right. Well, or if your opponent is way ahead. But the thing is with, and it's not real clear cut, but research shows that probably what's going to happen if you negative campaign is they're not going to come vote for you. They're just going to sit home. They're just not going to vote for your opponent. And so, when you ask me what I'm feeling, yeah, being the typical libertarian, I'm the one who's really great at pointing out problems and, really great at feeling outrage. And I am the eternal optimist. In fact, I'm way too optimistic. Like I can show you research that shows how I'm way too optimistic. So I mean,
why? Wait a minute. Why would you say you were too optimistic?
So research, and I hate to start every sentence with research shows, but that's what happens when you get a PhD. You don't want to just like start saying stuff and maybe have it just be an opinion. But this is, but you don't want to just say, oh, this is fact, because science keeps changing. So this is what research shows right now. Which, yeah, the people on the left, they need to learn what science is. But scale of 1 to 10, optimism. As you become more and more optimistic, you become more successful, typically make more money, become happier until you get to around 8. And then it starts to drop off. because if you're too optimistic, you're basically delusional. And like the well-known CEO who had pancreatic cancer, who instead of having surgery was like, I will eat healthy food, and then died. If you're too optimistic, then let's say your stock market strategy that you're losing money. It's like, oh, but I know it's going to work, or you've got a certain business strategy for your company, or even just a life strategy.
But Joe, you're not that far over on the spectrum, right? You're not that optimistic.
No, I'm sitting there at about a 10. I'm pretty optimistic. In fact, I didn't come on here to plug a book, but this is actually a pretty good book. Martin Seligman, who started the whole positive psychology movement, after doing decades of research on depression and learned helplessness and things that cause depression, he and after his granddaughter pointed out how grumpy he was, he decided to, hey, maybe we should start looking at the positive side. And around the year 2000, something like 99 out of 100 psychology experiments were on something negative, whether it was depression, whether it was lying and cheating, whether it was low self-esteem, 99 out of 100. He said, we need to start looking at the positive side. So he wrote a book called Learned Optimism, which, yes, you are born with a natural predisposition to be either optimistic or pessimistic, but you can change that with work. And he wrote the best books really to buy are those that they're written by the person doing the research, not some New York Times writer who, reads a few articles and then writes a book, but somebody who's actually in the research, knows what they're talking about, but writes a layperson's book, one that you don't have to get out the dictionary and follow class. And that's exactly what this book is. Well, the book opens up with a quiz to see where you are on the scale of optimism. Maybe I did the math wrong, but I think I was literally off the chart. like I don't think the chart went up as high. It might have been that I was in the very top of the upper echelon. So the problem is when you're that high in optimism, you're delusional. That's not
okay. But you wouldn't consider yourself to be delusional, correct?
No, not at all.
Well, I did run for president in 2020 as a third party.
But way more delusional people than you have won that game.
All right, but did you at any point think that you were going to win?
No, but I had hopes that I would get into some kind of debate. Although there was a lot going on behind the scenes that people didn't know about.
Yes, there was.
The new committee starting the new debate committee, and the campaign, and I think I can talk about this out in the open.
You can now. It's
okay. Yeah. So no, people either in our campaign or at headquarters were actually talking with. It's not like they send out some email and it goes in the spam folder. They were actually talking with these people, and
in the Trump campaign. There were people also in the Trump campaign that were talking to us.
Right. And the people in the Trump campaign were asking them serious questions like, hey, can you run
there was actually there was a location that had been mapped out. It was going to be in Chicago.
Yep, Chicago. And so the first debate went horribly, so bad that they had to cancel the second debate, right? Well, they didn't have to, but they decided that.
I think there was a COVID incident, wasn't there? Didn't we find out that Trump had COVID? He was actually with COVID while he was on stage and got sick immediately after.
Yeah, but I think most people attribute the lack of a second debate to the fact that things went so bad. That the first debate where it was just name calling and not getting anywhere.
It was a
and
cluster.
so my hope was, well, if the third debate goes as poorly as the first one, then one of the two are going to want to get out there and set the record straight, like, hey, they just slandered me with this and this and this. So,
but Trump has just a little bit of that crazy in him that it seemed plausible, because basically the way the debate commission rules are set up, and people don't understand how many ways the game's rigged. I'm constantly at pains to have these Trump people say to me, well, there were some ballots stolen in Arizona and this happened in Pennsylvania, whatever. And I'm like, cry me a river. You do everything you can to keep a libertarian candidate off the ballot. You do it. You've erected an illegal system that has special carve out in law. I mean, it's not, you can't go start your own debate commission and do exactly what they did. It's not possible. And they bring corporate money in. They say that we can only have these two candidates on stage, and those campaigns cannot participate in the event. They sign a statement saying that they will only do those debates. But he's just crazy enough to go, oh, sue me. We'll go do this. And right. Color outside the lines. And the people that were, the conversation was at the highest level of the campaign. I mean, this was a real conversation that they were going to potentially do something in Chicago, just a little more than a week out from the election. And it didn't materialize.
Well, two comments about what you were saying. First of all, about the stolen votes and votes not being counted. I was asked that question often. What do you think it's rigged? Do you think that votes are being lost? And my reply was, I don't know, but that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is I wasn't on the debate stage so that people even knew there was another option. That's, it's like, forget about 10,000 votes being lost. We've got, over 300 million people in the country who don't even know I'm running. In fact, afterwards, somebody told me kind of a funny story. A buddy of his had gone to vote, gets into the voting booth, sees, votes. And he calls his friend afterwards and says, yeah, I went to vote and there's Trump and Biden. And then somebody called Jo Jorgensen, who's he? And it's like, yeah, that's the real crime, is not any possible miscounting of the votes, but the fact that I wasn't put out there by a candidate or as a viable candidate. And secondly, they talk about, and I can never remember the name of the debate commission and the new one. It's kind of like, People's Front of Judea and Judeans People's Front. It's like, debate commission, America, whatever, you scramble some words and you've got two different debate commissions. So, but it's got the word commission right in the name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know what about the new one, but yes.
The old one. The old one
did. Yes.
Yes. So it makes it sound like it's some government entity, like here's a branch of the government overseeing, because the government oversees the election, right? So of course it would make sense that the government oversees the debate, and it's got some official government sounding name, like it's all fair and all of that. But it's a private entity, as I think you mentioned. And it's half owned by the Republicans and half owned by the Democrats. So they're putting this out as something that's fair, and it's not even close to fair.
Not even close. And it's not going to be around for the next election anyway. Jo, go into the future a little bit. What are your future plans here? Are you running? Are you going to be a candidate for president of the United States?
I'm not ruling it out at some point. I had a great time. I'd love to do it again. Right now, I'm working with People for Liberty. You never say never. I have no plans to run for 2024. Or I wouldn't be doing this for People for Liberty. First of all, I'm not allowed to do both. And I wouldn't want to start something with People for Liberty and then leave everybody high and dry. But I'm not to Nikki Haley's magic age of 75 yet. So I'll make sure it's before I turn. My post was, forget the cognitive tests. We need to give all politicians an economics test. I mean, that's what really counts.
Oh yeah. And those decisions have real impacts on real people. And often the people that it has the most impact on were never counted. All this stuff really matters. And I can understand why, Jo, you developed a sense of outrage over time. I can understand why that would be I mean, you see these injustices, and then you see people not really responding to them in a heartfelt way. You see them, and to the degree that it's the heart, you see some heart, it is performance heart. It is like, look at us, we're such good people, we care, but they don't actually do anything to lighten those burdens that at the end of the day, they created. So
Oh, yeah, and that's where, and you probably know how Harry Brown phrased it better than I, but he had that phrase where he would say the government breaks your leg and then they expect you to be grateful when they hand you a crutch or something.
Yes.
Do you remember him saying that?
Oh, yes. No, it's probably his most famous soundbite. Government breaks both your legs, hands you a pair of crutches, and says, see, without us, you wouldn't be able to walk.
Yes.
And so
that's what they're doing. And,
that's exactly what they're doing.
Like with the student loans, when I went to school, you could hold a part-time job, a night job, whatever, and almost, if not totally, pay your way through school. It might be a lot of work, but you could do it. Now you can't even do that. After the government got involved with the student loans, which meant lots of money, which, again, supply and demand. You need an economics class. You put in all this money, and of course, the colleges are going to go, oh, great, look at all this money. We can raise our tuition. And then the textbook companies, with all of their, the textbook prices are just outrageous. It's just, the whole thing is outrageous. And yes, correlation does not equal causation.
We covered a lot of ground here today. We found out a lot about you. So thank you very much.
And we didn't even talk about my not eating meat in respect. but
now everybody knows. Everybody knows that too.
Yeah.
So we'll put that on the quiz.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thanks for having me.